Hi, guys.
Guys, how are you? This is Mark.
And this is Michelle. And we're Mark and Michelle. This is Mark and Michelle. Whatever.
We are. Yeah, we are. There you go. We'll go with that. We are. So, tonight, we wanted to talk about what to me really is the last step in recovery. And, oddly enough, a lot of these steps, I was thinking about this last night, a lot of these steps, like the detox and the healing and the emotional detox and ridding yourself of old traumas and this kind of stuff caused by the autism, I've kind of done all simultaneously. It hasn't been a sequential order.
Right.
I didn't start healing I did start healing first.
But you were already doing emotional healing without knowing.
Right. Well, and then, like we talked about EFT, was it last night?
Yep.
EFT last night. Taj, how's it going? And he's always the first one to show up. Taj, you're like the first one in line for tickets, man. But we've been using EFT for 10 years and since 2009. And it's been fascinating. I've been doing the emotional stuff, the emotional detox. Marlo! And since then, and long before I knew I had autism, a good 3 years before I knew, and before I even suspected. Mm-hmm. And so then we find out about the diet, so I start the healing. Well, then later on, 4.5 years later, we hear about medical medium and start the detox. And so it's funny. While there seems to be 4 steps to me: healing, physical detox, emotional detox, and then the last one that I'm going to talk about tonight, training for a normal social response. You don't have to do those in any kind of order.
Well, except that last one has to be last.
That is true because, oddly enough, during the middle of gaps is when we started that.
Yeah. Yes.
And so that leads me into a quick comment here. The autism rights movement. In other words, the high-functioning autistic adults who talk about not having rights to live and to be who they are and this type of thing, complain about NTs and normality. The truth is, what I'm going to talk about tonight, training for a normal social response, let's talk about normal. The majority of people tend to interpret emotions generally the same way. And in other words, anger is anger pretty much across any culture. Happy is happy pretty much across any culture. And if you don't know when to be happy, or you don't know when to be sad, or you don't know when to be angry, or you don't know when to be supportive, then what it is you're missing the understanding in your mind of the language that the vast majority of the rest of humanity speaks. So if you want to complain about normal, you can complain about it all you want. But I guarantee you are missing the language that the monstrosity, huge, I don't know how else, ginormous majority of humanity already speaks. Emotion. And they know how to reply to each other in those emotions in the same way. All right? So let's move on. Training for normal social response. So let me give you a couple of quick stories. When I was still autistic, about a year before I had a diagnosis, when I suspected it, I was working for a big box electronics store, and I was working on their tech team. And so, fine, Geek Squad and Best Buy. Anyway,
okay.
And an older gentleman, some of you may have heard this story. In fact, we recently told it. An older gentleman came up and he said, "I lost my daughter today." And truthfully, being autistic at that point, I wasn't quite sure what he meant.
Like Did she like
Did she-
disappear or did she die?
Did he lose her in the Walmart
Right.
a block away?
Yeah.
Or what? And I figured, being older, he was probably in his 70s or 80s. You don't usually lose an adult daughter in a Walmart,
Right.
you know. But I still didn't know really what he meant. And I could not see or feel his sadness
The grief.
and his grief. Grief is much worse than sadness.
Yes.
For any of you who don't know, but I think most of you do, grief is much worse than sadness. So it was grief. Looking at it in hindsight from a new NT perspective now. So I didn't know how to respond. I said, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. See, there was no emotion in my voice. There was no fellow feeling. There was no compassion because I didn't understand fully. I didn't fully get his grief. And so now, fast forward to about 5 years later in 2016, I'd been on GAPS for, almost, well over 3 years at this point, since middle of 2013 to fall of 2016. Michelle and I sit down and we watch 2 movies. And some of you heard the story, some of you haven't. We watch Moonstruck with Nicolas Cage and Cher, and we watch When Harry Met Sally, which this year is its 30th anniversary. So we watch When Harry Met Sally with Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. Watching those movies, see, I hadn't seen those movies for years. I was autistic the last time I saw those movies. And I had done already 3 years of recovery on GAPS. Sitting down to watch those movies after 3 years on recovery and so much having come on for me was like watching 2 brand new movies. Really was. And because I started seeing the give and take in the relationships, not that it's hard to see that between Cher and Nicolas Cage. You know, it was quite a bit more subtle with Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. But I saw that too. That made the movies far more interesting than they ever were. They just looked like plays up on a screen to me when I first saw them back in the 80s. But now, and when we first met, but then in 2000, in fact, I want to see them sometime this year because they're both from this year, and see how I see them now.
Yeah.
But seeing those, there was a whole nother dimension. I was missing 7/8 of the iceberg in both of those movies. And so seeing those 3 years on recovery, I was just absolutely fascinated because I realized what I was seeing was what I was missing in real life with other people. And so we would stop the movie and Michelle goes, okay, what's going on here? And I would say, and she goes, you're right. And she said, but she would correct me a little bit here and there. Well, what was fascinating is as she was showing me how things were going on, is I didn't really have to learn a whole lot.
Right.
She didn't have to go from the most basic stuff and build on that because my brain apparently was already wired to recognize most of it. She was just pointing out the subtleties and I was going, oh, which was really cool because I saw what I was missing for my whole life between me and other people, between me and her. And so when I talk about training for normal social response, I'm not talking about some huge project like ABA therapy or some huge thing to remake over some autistic person's personality just so they can fit in. I'm talking about using the natural social ability of the human brain to guide a recovering autistic person in understanding social relationships, right? Because you don't have to instruct them from the most basic stuff up. My brain already worked that way, and in all my science classes, humans evolved to be social. Yes, we did, right? So we would stop, and Michelle would point those things out. She would correct me where I was wrong, which was very little, to be honest. And then she would say, and then she would add things. She would annotate, so to speak, as we went on. Now, all through that time, all through recovery on gas and so all through recovery on medical medium, I've also had access to a lot of very NT women who have a lot of social wisdom. And what I mean by that is I work with these women. And so they have been very instrumental in helping me clear things up. So I would go and ask him, a friend of mine, Jessica, well, there's two friends of Jessica. I'd go ask either one of them, I'd ask them a social question. And they would explain to me how social relationships are never black and white. And you have to be willing to allow relationships to evolve without being controlling or without putting heavy expectations on them. Because when you allow them to grow on their own, relationships to grow on their own, they wind up becoming fun, usually. Which, oddly enough, with a lot of people that I work with, that has actually happened. And that is really cool. I didn't know relationships were like that. So with these wise women, her being one, with these wise women, I've needed very little instruction to know what is normal socially. But with their help, they've helped me refine my sense of what I've been seeing. Right? Michelle, having taught autistic kids and adults for the past 25 years, now music, she can tell you that what she has taught me for the social stuff, she could never teach to those still autistic girls.
Right. Yes. Right. Absolutely.
Because it's not seeable by them.
Yep.
It wasn't seeable by me until my brain got the right nutrition and the right repair for it to wake up, for that part of it to wake up and go, oh, Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal love each other. They just like antagonizing the crap out of each other. Well, Billy Crystal more than anything else, you know. And then Cher and Nicolas Cage, that's them falling in inevitable love, but neither one of them wants to admit it, other than Nicolas Cage, yet he doesn't want to admit it either. Well, struggle isn't the right word. Tension?
It's an emotional struggle.
Well, it's an emotional struggle, okay. but the tension that emotional struggle creates was fascinating to feel and watch.
Yeah.
Because I never noticed that before. You know, I remember growing up and people saying, well, if she's picking at you, she must like you. Or I'd hear them say, more often I'd hear people say that to a girl, oh, if he's picking on you, he likes you.
Now we discourage that kind of talk.
Do we?
Yes. It leads to abuse, something. So we just let that go.
Oh, okay. What, picking on?
Yeah.
That kind of thing? Really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
But I could see that.
Yes.
You know, because those you never know.
Boys need to be taught not to pick on, and the girls need to know that it's not okay to be picked on, no matter what the intent is.
Well, because you don't really know the intent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, especially when you're young. You know, you just see behaviors, you mimic them because you see adults do them, and you think, oh, that's okay. You know, so which I did that, but it's been utterly fascinating to find out that there was a whole world out there that I thought was out there, but I had no clue of. And those of you who are adults who are recovering from autism, here's what you're going to need. And now I'm going to say this. I have 5 points listed here that are very important in training for normal social response. When you recover, when you get older, you have gaps in your development. In fact, I've even seen this with kids younger than 10. If they recover from autism, they have gaps in their development too. And it takes a good little bit to fill in those gaps socially and developmentally and learning and otherwise. And so this training for normal social response is repairing the gaps in social development that have been caused by the autism. Because when you have autism your whole life, you don't see things that you need to know. And so therefore you don't learn them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was going to say, I have one of the bullet points is this training for normal social response typically would be necessary for older folks recovering from late teens up. But I have since heard some things in the past few weeks that make me realize that no matter what age you recover from autism, you need this kind of training a little bit, because autism keeps you from developing correctly. That's why it's called a pervasive developmental disorder,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, I talked about built-in sociality. Yeah, I took anthropology as well. Mainly it was physical anthropology. We spent a lot of time in human evolution, in human variation, archaeology, and that. You realize humans are built to be social. So when I hear autistic adults in the autistic rights movement talk about, well, there's no such thing as normal. Okay, I get where you're going with that, because it leaves you and out to be you. But all the evidence, all archaeological evidence and anthropological evidence, even the vast majority of it has pointed to humans evolving to be social animals. It just has. And I can bring it all out if you want, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, so let's move on. I think we have the built-in sociality. Little help really is going to be needed, because when the social part of the brain is working, you just kind of recognize it for what it is, and then you go and say, hey, I saw such and such do this. And I think that means, and then is where the long-term support comes in. Now, fortunately, I have my long-term supporter here. Number one fan, number one teacher. Because I've been able to bring that stuff to her and say, hey, like tonight, a certain thing happened. And she said, well, I know where that person was coming from. They were trying to make everything all right. And I realized, I told her, I said, you know what? I saw that. I knew that's what that person was doing when that happened. She goes, yeah, that's exactly what was going on. Because she's corroborating what I see. And when I know she's an NT and she corroborates what I see, then I know I'm on the right track. So that's where long-term support. So you'll need people in your lives who you can corroborate what you see socially as you recover. One of the best things I found as a tool, movies. So,
or TV shows, because we watch as time goes by.
The British have an uncanny acting ability.
Well, and also Yes Minister.
True.
Right, so you saw a lot more emotional games.
That's true. And so between those two shows, As Time Goes By and Yes Minister, both British TV shows. And so we've been watching those, and both of them are very emotional. One is about a relationship, a long-term relationship that didn't exist for 38 years. They met 38 years ago, lost each other. 38 years later, got back together, and it's about that relationship evolving from that point. That's really fascinating to watch, because you see that they have developed all of their insecurities in those 38 years, and now they're having to renegotiate the new relationship with those old insecurities, being middle-aged. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. And that's true, because I did say that about As Time Goes By.
Yes.
Because
this means a lot more than it did before.
Exactly, because I could see all that now.
Yeah.
I could see all the tension in the relationship. And Yes Minister is political, and you get to see all the political games between politicians and civil servants in the British government, and it's really cool, because you really see all the mind stuff that goes on, and that's cool to watch too. That's what made me gullible as an autistic person, is because I couldn't see all the mind games and all the emotional games going on and avoid them when I needed to.
Right.
So long-term support, but movies as tools, TV shows as tools.
Choose them wisely.
Yes, definitely. So anyway, what did you have any stories you would like to?
No, we're at time.
We are at time, guys. So again, I'll go through these. Training for a normal social response. This is going to be necessary for pretty much anybody who recovers, no matter their age. Humans have built-in sociality. The brain was built for it. Little help needed. Not going to need. Those who are recovering aren't going to need much help because the brain is already there. They just need corroboration for what they see. Movies and TV shows are great tools, but choose them wisely, right? Long-term support. If you're recovering, you're going to need long-term support over a period of a few years so that you can get a full grasp, or as much as you can on sociality. So that is our program for tonight, other than two things.
Yes.
Keep doing that celery juice and keep doing that heavy metal detox smoothie. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at the same time where we will be talking about...
I think we're going to have to figure out what we'll be talking about.
Oh, okay.
I think we're at the end.
We may actually be at the end. Complete recovery, the outcome that we are all hoping for. We will talk about that.
Talk about that tomorrow.
All right, guys.
Okay.
See you tomorrow night.
See you guys.